Discernment is not suspicion, and it is not fear. It is the quiet intelligence of the spirit that helps you recognize what belongs in your life and what does not. Many chosen individuals struggle here because they have compassionate hearts. They want to believe the best about everyone. They want to give chances, extend grace, and avoid conflict. But discernment is not about rejecting people quickly. It is about perceiving clearly. It is the ability to sense when something feels off, even if there is no visible evidence yet. You may not have proof, you may not have dramatic signs, yet deep within there is a subtle pause, a hesitation, a nudge that tells you to slow down. That inner signal is a gift. It is protection working quietly on your behalf. Ignoring it often leads to confusion later. Honoring it leads to peace. The more you mature spiritually, the more refined this awareness becomes. You start noticing patterns instead of isolated moments. You begin to recognize how certain interactions drain you, while others strengthen you. This awareness does not make you arrogant, it makes you responsible. Discernment is a shield because it prevents unnecessary battles. It stops you from over-explaining yourself to people who have already decided not to understand. It guards your energy from constant negativity disguised as concern. It protects your dreams from subtle discouragement that appears harmless on the surface. When you use discernment, you are not judging harshly. You are observing honestly. You are allowing wisdom to guide your decisions instead of emotions alone. That is maturity. A shield is most effective before the attack becomes visible. In the same way, discernment works best before damage is done. Many people wait for undeniable proof before they adjust their boundaries. By then, trust has already been strained and peace has already been disturbed. Discernment encourages earlier action. It may prompt you to share less information. It may guide you to delay certain decisions. It may even lead you to create distance without hostility. These are not acts of fear. They are acts of stewardship over your life. You cannot fulfill your purpose if you are constantly repairing avoidable wounds. Protecting your spirit is part of honoring your calling. Sometimes the warning feels small. It might come as repeated discomfort during conversations. It might surface as inconsistency in someone's words and actions. Instead of dismissing these signs, reflect on them calmly. Ask yourself why your peace shifts in certain environments. Clarity grows when you pay attention instead of reacting impulsively. Discernment becomes stronger through practice. The more you listen to that inner wisdom, the more accurate it becomes. Over time, you will notice that honoring those quiet nudges saves you from larger regrets. Your shield is not meant to isolate you from everyone. It is meant to position you among the right people. When you embrace discernment, you move with confidence rather than confusion. You engage relationships from a place of strength, not vulnerability. And in doing so, you walk forward, protected, balanced, and prepared for what lies ahead. Not every connection in your life is a divine assignment. This truth can be difficult to accept because some relationships feel meaningful, timely, and even comforting. Yet, timing alone does not confirm purpose. There are people who enter your life for a season of learning, not for a lifetime of alignment. The challenge for chosen individuals is recognizing the difference. When you carry vision and direction, you naturally attract others. Some are inspired by your growth. Others are curious about your momentum. A few may even benefit from your strength, but benefit does not equal destiny. A divinely aligned connection strengthens your values, respects your boundaries, and supports your growth without hidden resistance. An unassigned connection, however, may subtly pull you away from focus. It might introduce distractions that appear harmless at first. It might normalize habits that weaken your discipline. Over time, small compromises accumulate. What once felt like harmless influence becomes delayed progress. This is why awareness matters. You are not called to reject people harshly. You are called to evaluate alignment honestly. When you reflect on your closest connections, ask yourself whether they push you toward clarity or toward confusion. Do they celebrate your evolution, or do they subtly prefer your earlier, less focused version? Not every presence is sent to travel your entire journey. Some individuals are chapters, not the whole story. Understanding this protects you from forcing permanence where only a season was intended. Acceptance of this truth allows you to release without bitterness and appreciate without attachment. It is important to understand that divine alignment produces peace, even during disagreement. You may not always think the same way as someone who is assigned to your life, but there will be mutual respect and shared direction. When a connection is not divinely aligned, tension often becomes a pattern. Conversations may consistently shift you off track. Your goals may feel questioned rather than supported. You might notice that progress accelerates when distance increases. These are signals, not coincidences. Emotional attachment can blur these signs. History, shared memories, or comfort can make separation feel unnecessary or extreme. But maturity teaches you that longevity does not automatically mean alignment. Sometimes the most familiar connections are the ones that quietly limit growth. Letting go does not mean you devalue the time shared. It means you recognize that seasons change. When you accept that not every relationship is assigned for your future, you gain freedom. You stop forcing understanding. You stop over-investing in people who are not investing in your direction. You begin to conserve your energy for spaces where it multiplies rather than drains. Alignment brings clarity, cooperation, and forward movement. When those qualities are absent repeatedly, it may be a sign that the connection was never meant to carry you into your next level. Wisdom is knowing when to appreciate the lesson and move forward with grace. Warnings rarely arrive with noise and dramatic signs. More often, they come quietly through intuition, repetition, and a subtle sense of unease. Intuition is that inner awareness you feel before logic catches up. It is the pause in your spirit when everything on the surface appears fine. You may be in a conversation that sounds supportive, yet something inside you feels unsettled. You may agree outwardly while inwardly sensing hesitation. That quiet feeling deserves attention. Chosen individuals sometimes override intuition because they want clear evidence. They wait for obvious proof before taking inner discomfort seriously. But intuition is often the first signal that something needs closer examination. It does not shout, it nudges. Repetition is another form of warning. You might notice the same pattern occurring again and again. A person may promise change but repeat the same behavior. A situation may seem resolved but produce the same outcome. When cycles continue despite conversations and understanding, repetition becomes a message. Unease is also significant. Peace is steady and grounded even during challenges. Unease lingers without clear explanation. It may show up as restlessness, tension, or mental overthinking after certain interactions. Instead of dismissing these signs, reflect calmly. Ask yourself what your inner awareness is trying to reveal. Warnings do not always mean immediate danger. Sometimes they simply indicate misalignment or future complications. Recognizing early signals prevents deeper disappointment later. Intuition, repetition, and unease are not enemies of faith. They are tools of wisdom designed to guide you steadily. When you begin to respect these subtle warnings, your decision-making becomes more balanced. Instead of reacting emotionally, you respond thoughtfully. If intuition surfaces, pause rather than proceed quickly. If repetition appears, examine the pattern instead of excusing it again. If unease remains after reassurance, consider creating healthy distance. Growth requires honesty with yourself. Many regrets begin with the sentence, "I knew something felt off." That statement reveals that the warning was present but ignored. Learning to trust your inner awareness strengthens your confidence. It does not make you suspicious of everyone. It simply encourages you to observe consistently. Over time, you will notice that honoring these signals leads to fewer complications and clearer relationships. You will also discover that peace returns when you act in alignment with what you sensed early on. The goal is not to live in constant caution. It is to live in steady awareness. When intuition aligns with consistent observation, clarity follows. When patterns are acknowledged instead of minimized, cycles break. And when unease is addressed with wisdom rather than denial, you protect your emotional and spiritual balance. Subtle warnings are valuable because they give you time to adjust before situations escalate. Paying attention early is an act of maturity, not fear. A name, or even a simple initial, can represent more than one individual person. Sometimes it becomes a symbol of a pattern that has appeared more than once in your life. You may notice that different people sharing a similar trait, personality style, or even the same starting letter of a name tend to produce similar outcomes in your journey. This is not about superstition, it is about awareness of repetition. When something keeps resurfacing in slightly different forms, it is wise to pause and evaluate the deeper lesson. The initial may simply draw your attention to a familiar cycle. Perhaps you have encountered individuals who speak confidently but struggle with consistency. Perhaps you have experienced enthusiasm at the beginning of connections that later turn into subtle resistance. When you hear or see that initial again, your memory connects it to previous experiences. That connection is not random. It is your mind and spirit recognizing unfinished lessons. Instead of focusing on the letter itself, focus on the behavior attached to your past experiences. What traits were present before disappointment occurred? What conversations left you feeling diminished or uncertain? Patterns repeat when they are not consciously addressed. If you only react to the surface detail, you may miss the underlying issue, but if you recognize the symbolic meaning, you gain insight. The initial becomes a reminder to apply wisdom where you once ignored it. It prompts you to move slower, observe longer, and evaluate alignment more carefully than before. Understanding symbolism requires emotional honesty. It is easy to dismiss recurring signs as coincidence, especially when you desire connection. Yet growth demands reflection. When a pattern shows up again, ask yourself whether you have changed your response or simply hoped for a different outcome. If you continue engaging with the same personality type that once drained you, results are unlikely to shift. Awareness breaks cycles. The purpose of recognizing a symbol is not to create fear of certain names or labels. It is to highlight tendencies that require stronger boundaries. You might realize that you are drawn to charisma but overlook inconsistency. You might discover that you value reassurance, yet ignore actions that contradict promises. These insights are powerful because they shift responsibility back to your choices. When you identify a recurring pattern, you gain the opportunity to respond differently. Instead of reacting from habit, you act from understanding. That is maturity. Symbols serve as reminders of lessons already taught. They encourage you to apply previous wisdom rather than repeat previous mistakes. When you honor what repetition reveals, you protect your progress. You stop personalizing every disappointment and start recognizing behavioral trends. In doing so, you strengthen discernment and create space for healthier, more aligned connections in the future. Emotional manipulation does not always appear aggressive or obvious. In many situations, it is subtle and wrapped in words that sound supportive. It can look like loyalty, deep concern, or intense friendship. At first, the attention feels affirming. Someone checks on you constantly, wants to be involved in every decision, and expresses strong attachment to your presence. Yet over time, the dynamic begins to shift. The same loyalty that once felt comforting starts to feel controlling. Simple boundaries are met with guilt. Independent decisions are interpreted as rejection. This is where awareness becomes essential. True loyalty respects your growth and individuality. Manipulation, however, seeks influence and control while appearing caring. You may notice that whenever you attempt to create space, the other person reacts with emotional pressure. They might remind you of everything they have done for you. They may frame your independence as ingratitude. These responses are not rooted in healthy connection. They are attempts to maintain leverage. Chosen individuals are often compassionate and empathetic, which makes them vulnerable to this pattern. They want to avoid hurting others, so they overextend themselves to keep peace. But peace maintained through self-neglect is not true harmony, it is imbalance. When loyalty becomes conditional upon your compliance, it is no longer loyalty. It is emotional bargaining. Recognizing this distinction allows you to respond wisely instead of reacting defensively. Manipulation can also appear in subtle discouragement disguised as advice. Someone may consistently question your plans under the pretense of protecting you from failure. They may emphasize risks while minimizing opportunities. If their words repeatedly leave you doubting your capabilities, pause and evaluate the pattern. Support should strengthen your confidence even when offering constructive feedback. Manipulation slowly erodes it. Another sign is inconsistency between words and actions. A person may declare unwavering support but disappear when accountability is required. They may demand transparency from you while withholding honesty themselves. These imbalances reveal underlying motives. Emotional manipulation thrives in confusion. It benefits when you second-guess your instincts. That is why clarity is powerful. When you calmly observe behavior rather than cling to flattering words, truth becomes visible. Healthy relationships allow room for disagreement without emotional punishment. They celebrate your progress without competition. They respect your time and do not demand constant reassurance. If you find yourself frequently explaining basic boundaries or feeling responsible for another person's emotional stability, reassess the dynamic. Awareness does not require hostility, it requires firmness. By maintaining clear limits and consistent standards, you prevent manipulation from taking root. In doing so, you protect both your peace and your purpose while remaining grounded and compassionate. Delayed obedience often feels harmless in the beginning. You sense the need to make a change, to create distance, or to adjust a boundary, yet you postpone action because you want more certainty. You tell yourself that you need additional confirmation. You convince yourself that waiting will make things clearer. But when inner clarity has already been given, delay can create unnecessary complications. The longer you ignore a clear nudge, the more entangled the situation becomes. Small issues grow into larger misunderstandings. Subtle tension becomes open conflict. What could have been resolved quietly now requires greater emotional effort. Obedience in this context does not mean dramatic action. It simply means responding when you recognize misalignment. If you already know that a connection is draining your focus, delaying change will not restore balance. If you sense that a habit is weakening your discipline, postponing correction only strengthens the pattern. Many chosen individuals struggle with delayed obedience because they fear disappointing others. They worry about being misunderstood. They hope that circumstances will shift without confrontation, yet avoidance rarely produces peace. It usually extends discomfort. Acting at the right time prevents deeper strain later. Timely decisions protect your energy and preserve relationships from unnecessary damage. When you respond early, adjustments are smoother and less painful. There is also a practical dimension to delayed obedience. Opportunities are often connected to timing. When you hesitate to move forward because of external pressure, you may miss moments designed for your growth. The longer you remain in environments that no longer align, the harder it becomes to transition. Familiarity creates attachment, even when progress has stalled. You may begin to rationalize staying in situations that clearly require change. Over time, this rationalization weakens your confidence. You start questioning your ability to make decisive choices. Breaking this cycle requires courage, not aggression. It involves trusting that clarity was given for a reason. When you act promptly on responsible insight, you reduce future battles. You do not allow frustration to accumulate. You do not permit misalignment to shape your direction. Obedience strengthens discipline because it reinforces self-trust. Each time you honor a wise decision without delay, your confidence grows. You learn that listening to inner guidance leads to steadiness rather than chaos. Delayed action often magnifies problems. Timely action minimizes them. By choosing responsiveness over hesitation, you protect your path and prevent avoidable setbacks. In doing so, you move forward with clarity, stability, and renewed focus. Separation is not always a sign of loss. Sometimes it is the clearest form of protection. When distance begins to form between you and someone, the immediate reaction may be fear or sadness. You may assume that something valuable is slipping away, yet not every departure is a setback. In many cases, separation prevents deeper harm that you cannot yet see. You might notice conversations becoming less frequent or plans no longer aligning naturally. Instead of forcing reconnection, pause and observe what this space reveals. Often, clarity grows in distance. Emotions settle, patterns become easier to identify, and your perspective widens. Protection rarely feels dramatic at first. It may simply look like schedules no longer matching or communication gradually fading. These shifts can be uncomfortable, especially if you are accustomed to constant contact, but growth requires room to breathe. When a connection limits your focus or drains your consistency, separation restores balance. It allows you to regain momentum without constant explanation. Protection sometimes means being removed from environments that no longer match your direction. You might not fully understand why the shift occurred, but peace slowly replaces tension. That peace is confirmation. It signals that distance has created safety rather than damage. Trusting this process strengthens emotional maturity. You learn that not every ending requires resistance. Some endings are quiet safeguards guiding you towards stability. It is important to resist the urge to chase what is naturally creating space. When you pursue connections that are clearly drifting, you may interrupt a protective process. Instead of forcing continuity, evaluate how you feel during the separation. Has your clarity improved? Has your focus sharpened? Do you feel lighter without constant interaction? These reflections reveal whether distance is harmful or helpful. Protection does not always announce itself with clear explanations. Sometimes it works silently, removing distractions before they become obstacles. You might later discover information or outcomes that confirm why separation was necessary. Even without visible proof, the return of steady peace is enough. Healthy connections withstand growth and respect boundaries. If separation exposes fragility, that insight is valuable. It shows that the bond relied more on proximity than on genuine alignment. Accepting protective distance requires trust in your direction. It means believing that what is meant to remain will do so without strain. You do not need to force understanding or defend your decision to create space. Protection prioritizes your long-term stability over short-term comfort. When you embrace separation as guidance rather than rejection, you release anxiety and regain confidence. In doing so, you move forward, strengthened, aware, and prepared for connections that align naturally with your purpose. Peace is more than a pleasant feeling. It is confirmation that your direction is aligned with wisdom. When you make a decision that protects your well-being, peace settles in gradually. It may not arrive with excitement, but it brings steadiness. Your thoughts become clearer. Your emotions feel balanced. You no longer replay conversations in your mind, searching for validation. This kind of peace is not dependent on other people agreeing with you. It remains even when others question your choice. That is how you recognize it as genuine confirmation. When direction is wrong, even small decisions create internal tension. You may justify your actions outwardly while feeling unsettled inwardly. Rest becomes difficult. Doubt increases. Peace acts as an internal compass guiding you back towards stability. Chosen individuals sometimes ignore peace because they expect confirmation to feel dramatic. They look for loud signs or immediate rewards. Yet true alignment often feels calm and quiet. It does not demand attention. It simply exists. When you distance yourself from a draining connection and notice relief instead of regret, that relief matters. When you establish boundaries and experience clarity instead of confusion, that clarity is significant. Peace confirms that your actions are preserving your growth rather than hindering it. Learning to value this steady reassurance strengthens your confidence in future decisions. It is important to distinguish peace from temporary comfort. Comfort can exist even in unhealthy situations because familiarity feels safe. Peace, however, continues after change. It remains once the initial discomfort of adjustment passes. For example, creating distance may feel unfamiliar at first. You might question whether you acted too quickly. But if, after reflection, your spirit feels lighter and your focus sharper, that sustained calm reveals alignment. Peace also improves your perspective. You think more rationally. You respond rather than react. Conversations no longer carry hidden pressure. When peace is present, you are not constantly defending your boundaries. You are simply living within them. This stability allows you to grow without distraction. If anxiety repeatedly returns around a specific person or situation, pay attention to that contrast. Peace highlights what belongs. Tension exposes what does not. The goal is not to eliminate all challenges from your life. Growth will always involve effort. However, aligned effort feels purposeful, not draining. When you follow direction that protects your values and focus, peace confirms that you are on solid ground. Trusting that confirmation prevents you from second-guessing wise decisions. It reassures you that stepping back was not weakness, but strength. And in that reassurance, you move forward, grounded, confident, and prepared for healthier connections. Growth will always require courage, especially when it involves confronting uncomfortable truths. One of the most difficult moments in personal development is recognizing that someone close to you may not be aligned with your future. It is easier to stay silent. It is easier to pretend that subtle issues will correct themselves over time. But growth demands honesty. When you begin evolving, your standards shift. Your priorities become clearer. The conversations you once tolerated may now feel unproductive. This change does not make you superior. It means you are maturing. Courage is needed because maturity often disrupts familiar dynamics. Some people are comfortable with the version of you that was uncertain or easily influenced. When you become decisive and self-aware, the dynamic changes. Not everyone will celebrate that shift. You may sense resistance, subtle criticism, or emotional distance. Instead of shrinking back to preserve comfort, courage invites you to remain steady. It encourages you to honor your development without apology. Confronting misalignment does not require aggression. It requires clarity. You acknowledge what you see without exaggeration. You respond to patterns instead of isolated incidents. This honesty protects your future. If you ignore what growth reveals, you risk returning to cycles you have already outgrown. Courage ensures that progress continues rather than reverses. There is also courage in setting and maintaining boundaries after clarity has arrived. It is one thing to recognize misalignment. It is another to act on that recognition consistently. When you establish new limits, some individuals may test them. They may question your motives or attempt to draw you back into familiar patterns. Standing firm during these moments strengthens your confidence. It teaches others how to treat you and reminds you of your value. Courage does not mean you eliminate compassion. You can remain respectful while protecting your direction. You can communicate calmly without surrendering your standards. Over time, consistent courage reshapes your environment. Those who respect your growth will adapt and remain. Those who resist it will gradually distance themselves. Both outcomes serve your progress. Growth is not comfortable, but it is necessary. Each time you choose truth over temporary ease, you reinforce your commitment to becoming stronger. You prove to yourself that you are capable of making mature decisions even when emotions are involved. That self-trust becomes foundational. It prepares you for greater responsibilities and healthier relationships. When courage guides your actions, you no longer fear necessary change. You understand that protecting your future may require difficult conversations and firm boundaries. And through that courage, you continue moving forward with clarity and strength.